Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today we're going to be talking to Matt O'Neill, and we're going to talk about happiness being a choice and choosing to be happy. And I'm I'm excited to have this conversation because last week was very interesting. It was like one of the best weeks I've ever had, one of the worst weeks I've had. And as I reconciled those thoughts on Monday, during a 5 mile walk, I ended up, I knew the exact moment that there was an old part of me, a dissatisfied part of me, an angry part of me trying to creep in. And I had this idea of suppressing it. And I'm walking down the hill and I go, why am I trying to suppress it? I shouldn't be suppressing it. This is not a suppression issue. I need to choose something different. And choosing who I want to be, the vibe I want to carry, what I want to put out into the world, and what I'm about. And right then, I was like, okay, this is a choice. And so I'm excited to kind of explore this because I'm 48 and it took me this long to realize it. And we always say everything's connected. And this conversation is happening at this time, I think, for this reason. In a way, I wish it maybe could have happened Sunday, so I wouldn't have had so much turmoil Sunday and Monday for about 15 hours and doing mental gymnastics and some negative self-talk or coming down on myself. And so I'm excited. So welcome, Matt. How are you doing today?
Richard, what's up, bro?
Oh,
Man, dude, your story is powerful. I'm excited to hear about it. I'm excited to hear about the best week that you've had and then the worst week that you've had and what it was that you were going through. But doing a 5 mile walk,
hmm.
that's genius. That's
Yeah.
genius. As when we move our bodies, our minds work better. And one of the
Hmm.
things, if I'm really
Hmm.
bothered by something, it sounds like you were really bothered on
Oh, yeah.
Sunday. And I actually put this in my book. I'll put on my shoes and I'll go for a walk because just changing our posture, walking is a powerful thing. It's a powerful way to change our mind is by changing our posture. When we're really bothered, we tend to get really small
Mm,
and then our
yeah.
thinking gets really small. And so if we can move our bodies, we make ourselves a little bit bigger and our thinking gets bigger. We also are like walking around outside and just the sunshine and the trees and nature makes us happier. Our thoughts work better when we get happier. So that was a really great idea that you had to go for that walk. It's something I recommend very, very much. Exercise, go for a run, go to the gym, start moving, go dancing, right?
Oh,
Anything
yeah.
to move our bodies. If we start moving our bodies, our minds work better. So that kudos to you. But man, I'd love to hear about it. Tell us the story. What got you bothered?
Well, all right. I have a 10-year-old daughter and you know, it's not always perfect and she had a mini meltdown. And in that meltdown, I was like um yeah, it was like she kind of one fell sweeping motion like knocked something, a school project off the table that we were working on. And I looked at her and I was like, because I was like, I want you to pick that up. But, the way I looked at her, 2 years ago, I was quite a different person. And I had some anger issues. And when I would get angry, I would break things or smash things. And I guess I had that look and it frightened her. And that killed me inside. It was like soul crushing to go, that's no, this is the person I love the most. You know, I don't want her to feel that way. And I realized some of it was due to a person I used to be. It was all my responsibility, all my fault. And so I felt horrible And I had to step away and digest that and uh, fight with myself about it. And it was rough. Some journaling. I sat in silence. I went to like kind of like a dam and a lake and listened to the water and downloaded all this information. And, it took a while and I come back and, I talked to her and I told her how I felt and, that I was sorry. And I understood how the old me caused that and triggered it, you know? And so that was one piece. And then I was triggered in like another group setting where, somebody kind of called me weird, but it was weird in a good way, meaning like, I'm different. I'm unique. I'm an anomaly in a group. I'm not the same as everybody else. But, growing up different and with different opportunities and you're a child and you want to fit in. And when you don't fit in because you're so different, whether or not it's you're gifted, you're smarter, you're more athletic, it could be anything. Um, you feel different. And so then you begin to mute yourself and kind of turtle up. And so I had that happen. And when that happens, you're not expressing yourself fully, but then also the group doesn't get the full benefit of what you bring as that unique individual to the conversation. Now, the best parts of my week were I'm part of the Podcast Connection Network and the founder, Hunter Allen, his podcast, Everything's Connected. He happened to be 2.5 hours from me here in Texas, and he's normally in Utah. And I was able to drop what I needed to do and actually go meet him for the first time because he invited me into the network 9 months ago, and we've only interacted via TikTok, Discord, Zoom, and stuff like that. And so that was just a wonderful experience, and we had a great time. And, I have some pictures posted, and, you can see the presence, my presence, and what I mean by presence, I mean being present in the moment, and the smile and the genuineness. And then I went to a concert on Friday and met up with a couple that I had met back at a concert in January and told them about the podcast and their listeners, and we keep in touch. And they're like, "Hey, we're going to the same show." And, I go off and alone and met up with them. And, I got this new accountability group that I've started. And his wife was super excited that I'm kind of rebranding the podcast in some form or fashion to actually start to become more geared towards men. Now, it doesn't mean I will not have female guests, because like I interviewed a marriage and family counselor a couple episodes ago, and it was a great episode, and I think it's very valuable even for men. But I'm starting to realize that, what I want to do and offer is to specifically help men. But I also have some pictures with him, and there's that genuine smile, that
Mhm.
presence. And so, taking these two uh, kind of dualities of how the week was, and
What an awesome
then,
week. What a killer
yeah,
week.
and,
So, hey man, I
but
want to applaud you. This is you already have it. So, the highest levels of joy and happiness are inevitably yours. And the reason that I say that with such confidence for you is that you're recognizing when you're triggered. And then you're recognizing when you get triggered that you have tools in your toolbox to work through it and figure it out. And you're now conscious. And once we become conscious to how we're feeling and know that, hey, I'm creating these feelings, that this is me that's creating these feelings, that I have been triggered. It wasn't my daughter throwing the thing that
right,
triggered me. It wasn't what the person said if they called me weird or if they didn't. That's not what triggered me. It's my own internal response to the external world that has created my mood, that's created my happiness or my unhappiness. So you're already there. Once you get to that point, highest levels of joy and happiness are inevitable because now we're like, just figure out what's going on inside of me, and then I can keep improving it. I can keep doing the inner work, and eventually my trigger time will become less and less. Now, triggers never go away though.
Yeah.
And the most enlightened masters, the most enlightened masters get triggered. I went and spent a weekend with Eckhart Tolle this summer. And he said that he was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago.
Mhm.
And he was frightened and shocked
Yeah.
and upset about it. And who wouldn't be, right? Just because we meditate all day and we teach people about the power of now and intense presence doesn't mean we're not human and we're not going to get triggered. So, this idea that we'll never get triggered at some point, we'll get so high in our spiritual ascension or our emotional growth that we're not going to get triggered anymore, that's a falsehood. And that's seeking perfection that just doesn't exist on this
Mhm.
plane of duality. But what does exist is exactly what you're doing right now. You are being the perfect model for how happiness is a choice.
Well, I'm trying. And it's funny because in one of the in that group setting, it was like, well, is there something you would like to improve on? And I had heard this podcast earlier in the week, and it all ties together. It's really about learning to identify quicker, but to shorten the window at which you start to turn it around and take that action. Now,
Mhm.
15 hours was way too long for me, but that's shorter than any other time it has been in the
It's not
past.
it's not way too long. Actually, it's really powerful because you were highly triggered. And 15 hours is a great amount of time. So it's really not that long. And some people will get triggered and then they'll be triggered for a week, some for a month, some for a year, and then some just live in a perpetual state of anger and suffering or depression and suffering, and they don't know how to get out. So the fact that you're able to get out in just 15 hours, like, dude.
Oh, it was rough. But and I think something powerful came to me. I had some, I did some episodes where my dad ended up in the ICU and all this stuff, and it's been kind of this weird, crazy several months. But in that moment, the same thing happened. And one thing I've been starting to ask myself more is, what am I supposed to be learning from this? What is this
Mm.
teaching me?
I've got
And
another question. So
mhm,
that's a super powerful question. What am I supposed to be learning from this? So if we look at our life as every single experience is here because it's tailor made for our evolution, our emotional and spiritual
mhm,
evolution. And then every single trigger then becomes part of the master plan and something we could be excited about. So
mhm.
when you ask the question, what am I to be learning from this? This is supposed, we want to say this is supposed to be happening. So
Ooh,
that's our biggest suffering is not from the event, it's our resistance to the event. All the suffering is that shouldn't have happened. Why did that happen? And so when we stop resisting it and we say, this is supposed to be happening, this is exactly the plan, this is perfection. And I love your question. What's the lesson here? But the other question is, what's great about this?
so what's interesting when you were saying this, the the interesting part of it was I said to myself, I go, look, you're a podcaster. You're striving for 100 episodes December 14th and to continue going. If you keep doing this, which you want to, not everybody's going to get your intention and your message. And so you need to get used to this because this is going to be normal. And then there was another thing with, my daughter and like in a group setting with friends and, you know, they're approaching teenagers and girls can be catty. And, I had to have a talk with her about following a crowd. And I said, you don't want to start this like at 10 years old. Like you want to be yourself and you want to be an individual because I go, what happens when you're 17 years old and your friends want to go to a party and you know that alcohol use is wrong underage and you follow them to fit in and then all of a sudden they want to drive and you get in a car accident and somebody passes away or something all because you wanted to fit in and I said you need to be unique and I was like oh my gosh I'm like the exact thing I was feeling triggered about,
Mm,
being weird, unique, different, is exactly what I told her to be and do. So it was, for me, it was like boom, like, oh my gosh. And so when you were saying this is supposed to be happening,
yep.
part of the master plan, I have goosebumps right now.
Isn't that
Um,
cool? Isn't that cool?
it is that,
A lot of times though, we don't see
yeah,
it that quick.
yeah.
But one of the exercises in my book, the Good Mood Revolution book,
Hmm.
it's on the chapter of acceptance because one of the best moods we can get to is accepting what is happening. And the exercise is to think back on the most painful experiences in your past, the ones we don't want to replay, the ones we don't want to live through again.
I know,
Right.
right?
Think to the most painful experiences that you definitely at the time were like, no way, this one shouldn't be happening. This one sucks. And now I want you to come up with three reasons why that had to happen for you to become who you are.
Man.
And when we do that exercise, it's called connecting the dots, is the name of the exercise. We start to realize, oh, wow, if that tragedy hadn't happened, if that big setback hadn't happened, if I hadn't have been so disappointed here, it wouldn't have brought me to that point, to this point, to this point. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Holy cow. Actually, everything's part of the plan. And once we notice that
Hmm.
the most painful things are part of the plan, then we get into a new painful thing and we can rest with confidence. This too is part of the plan. And that's acceptance. Now, acceptance is not for everybody yet. It is our inevitable journey. We will
Yeah.
definitely get there at some point in the evolution of our soul, but not everybody's ready for such a high spiritual concept. It's one of the highest moods that we can get to. I talk about the levels of consciousness, the levels of moods. There's 16 of them, and this is level 14, acceptance. Most of us are dealing with the lower eight, which are the eight
Yeah.
bad moods, and I want to talk about some of those because you hit on a few of them, and I just want to go into them because we want to heal these ones too. Every time we get triggered by one of the eight bad moods, what comes up from inside of us is begging for us to heal it and understand it better. So when you got the comment, hey, you're a little bit weird or unique, that if we're completely healed from the bad mood of shame, which is the no, level
Yes.
one, it's the
That's what I
hardest.
feel all the time. That's what causes me to run away and isolate.
That's the we every single person has it, and we all have work to do to heal it. When that one gets triggered, man, it feels so bad. It feels like we're being rejected. It feels like we're not good enough as we are, that we're not the way we're supposed to be. All of this is a lie. So shame is a complete lie.
Mhm.
And when that gets triggered, it's a wonderful opportunity to work on it. So you've already done the work, but for the person listening, I want them to understand what the work was. You got triggered, and the trigger was shame. I'm not enough. There's something wrong with me. I'm not right. That's basically the language of shame. And all of us have the same, in that emotion, we all feel the exact same way. Then it's to say, oh, okay, I recognize this. This is the emotion of shame. It's not real. It's a lie. These thoughts that I'm not enough and I'm not right as I am, complete lie. So then all we do is we declare the truth and we say, I'm exactly how I'm supposed to be. I'm the way I was designed. All of my experiences have led me to this point. Who I am is awesome. I love exactly who I am. I appreciate exactly who I am. Not everybody will, and but it doesn't matter. If I give myself my own approval,
Right.
that's the only thing that matters. I cannot affect the approval of other people. That's outside of my realm of control. And I don't focus on things I can't control. But what I can control is, am I proud of me? And once we get to that point, now we get an internal, unshakable confidence
Mm.
that no one can take from us. And it's like, if this person doesn't like what I have to say, totally fine. Not everybody has to like what I have to say. But if they say mean things to me, now, because I believe in myself so much and my own values, I look at them with total compassion. I'm like, oh man, if you're projecting that kind of suffering out of your mouth and onto me, I just know that inside of you is so much suffering. And what I have for you is just compassion. And I don't want to retaliate. I know it's not about me, it's about them. And now I don't want to kick them either because they're already down.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was that first one was that emotion of shame. And it's just a lie. It's just 100% a lie. And all we have to do is just affirm the truth like you've already done. Like, oh, wait a minute. I am unique and I love that I'm unique. And I'm telling my daughter to be unique because there's gifts in this.
Yes. Yeah. It's like you have to, I sat there and, oh, I had another trigger with somebody who was like, I don't know. There was just an honest mistake made, and in this honest mistake, my fault. I took ownership. I apologized to the person, and I said, my bad. Um, and but they weren't very forgiving, and I finally realized they were kind of projecting their thing, and I sat there and I said, look. When I digested all this and I made this clip for my accountability group, it's like, hey, like I know who I am and what I'm about. I'm a kind, caring, compassionate person. I'm forgiving. I'm understanding. I like to lead with love and grace. And that's the most aligned version of me. And that's when I
It's
feel
beautiful.
good.
That's a beautiful version,
And
right? That's who we all
I
want to
have the
be.
goosebumps again.
Yeah.
And I said, the person I was 2 years ago, the vindictive and violent me, that we would have a problem if you looked at me sideways. Um, that's not what I'm about anymore. I feel negative emotion just even talking about it, remembering that person, even now, I'm like,
But that
I'm not
person,
about that anymore.
that person also was perfect. And it was also part of the plan. And it was also part of the journey. And this is part of the self-forgiveness. That's the other piece with your daughter and kind of what you're discussing now. Without us experiencing what it feels like to act in painful ways, we can't have compassion for the person who acts in painful ways. So you being an angry person who would project your anger onto others and cause harm because it causes harm when we do that.
Yeah.
And then now recognizing, hey, that's not who I want to be now. There was nothing wrong with you then. That was just part of your curriculum. It was a lesson. Oh,
Look,
I can see. And so
curriculum.
now this person who was not offering you forgiveness and who was projecting their kind of annoyance or frustration or which are all forms of anger back at you, you can have total compassion for them and you can be like, oh, I know what it's like to be an angry person. You're suffering. And then we now don't need their forgiveness because we know that they're in pain and we can just pray for them that they find the same love and grace that now fills you.
How did you get into this? Yeah, so we started the discussion, but let me know how you got into this so we can go a little bit deeper. How did you get into this and come to understand this? What was the catalyst for you even seeking to pursue this?
I truly think I was born with this as a mission. And when I had little breadcrumbs of thoughts that would come to me even as young as 5, that I would be teaching the world about how to feel better about themselves. And I'm like, man, that's a weird thought. Like almost like not even from me, right? It's like
It's
that's
kind of
what I'm
like when
saying.
like, nobody ever taught me about, let's say, religion or my parents, because I was burned as a child and spent 3 months in a burn unit at one. I was baptized Catholic, but they never forced me to do any of the Catholic things. They said when I was old enough, I could make my own decisions. But I describe it as this feeling as nobody ever told me about religion or the concept of God or a higher power. You can call it whatever you want to call it, the universe. But I've always known it from a very young age that there was something there, bigger,
Mhm.
um, divine, that was
Right.
kind of maybe directing my divine purpose, whatever that was to be. And I've always just been open to the fact of I work on me. And when the time comes for me to give the world whatever it is God, the universe wants me to give the world, it will be shown to me.
And it is. And you're on the podcast and you're doing it and you're talking to people all over the world, right? It was shown to you. And so that was what that I believe we come into this life with a mission. And you know, the I don't remember who said the quote, but the two most important days of your life are the day that you're born and then the day you figure out why.
Yep.
And it wasn't like I was 5 and I was articulating to everyone, hey, I'm
Right.
going to go teach the world this. But there were little breadcrumbs of this is what's going on. And then in my teens, it would show up. In my 20s, it would show up. And then in my mid 30s, I actually asked a question to nobody at 4:45 in the morning. I was just sitting in my office, and the question was, what can I do to be the biggest service to humanity? And I got back an audible answer, 3 words, write a book.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's weird. Like, that's weird. Somebody just spoke to me in my office. And so I wrote that down. I'm like, okay, I was told to write a book. And you know, I'm like, what should it be about? And there wasn't an answer. But then what it was supposed to be about, all the breadcrumbs started to come back. Right. So throughout my whole life, it was like all of these things I'd already been guided that this is what I was to do. And that's how I got into it, it was just a constant guidance of we're going to help people feel better about themselves. And then from that moment, though, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to help people do this, I have to get really good at it. And it just became an obsession with figuring out emotions, figuring out things that bother people, figuring out how to help them feel better. And from that obsession and just literally hundreds of books and seminars all over the world and meeting
Hmm.
the coolest people ever, came the Good Mood Revolution book and the podcast. And now, you know, it's just been a super fun ride helping people feel amazing.
What did you do before, or like you had this like career wise? What kind of jobs or experiences, things that shaped you or that were part of your curriculum?
hmm Yeah, I became an entrepreneur at a young age. So when I was 25, I started a company, a real estate brokerage,
Hmm.
and it became one of the fastest growing companies in the state of South Carolina. And then from that, I ended up with 100 employees. And so I've got 100 people, right?
Yeah.
All coming to me with usually not real estate problems,
Yeah. No.
usually mental health and real life problems, the
Yeah.
passing of a parent, somebody that's really sick, uh, you know, difficult children, difficult marriages, drug addictions, alcohol addictions, all the things, right? Because out of 100 people, this is just what you deal with. And so part of it, like then my like mission was being fulfilled serving 100 people. And
Right.
they would say, oh man, we just want mindset with Matt. Can you just do more mindset with Matt? Right. That's what they would all
Okay.
talk about, that I would just train mindset. And that, so a lot of my philosophy was actually being forged through my 20s and early 30s with all of my employees.
Yeah, because that was kind of like my leadership experience was I I was in grad school at the time, and theoretically it's teaching you some stuff, but there's a lot of OJT, and I skipped like the supervisor role, and I don't know, but I always had this kind of thing of my thing was you build the relationships because kind of the job is the job. But the relationships, like you said, it's the interpersonal problems. And then I managed a largely female staff in healthcare, lots of nurses and stuff like that. And, you know, it they can have problems and it can get catty. And so you're diffusing situations. But, every day it was about building the relationships because the relationships to me were like, sure, I could ask you to stay late and work overtime or whatever, and or I could tell you to do something and you'll do it because I'm the boss. But that's not what I want. I want you to do it because you want to do it for me, because you respect me, because I add value to your life and you feel that I, as a leader, care about you as an individual, your well-being, be it your home life or your work life. And, I had a rough go. It took about 2 years in leadership, and I got written up for off-the-cuff comments because I came from military kitchens and different things that were largely in the emergency room, level one trauma center, where everything is fast paced, do the job. It's not
Oh, I've
very
seen The
politically
Bear.
correct.
I've seen The
So,
Bear.
yeah, it's very
Right?
much like that, but I had to learn the hard way. And yeah, I eventually became a tier one leader through
Yeah.
associate engagement, where they give out, surveys. Do you think your leader's a good leader? Do you think they care about you? And I received the highest accolade on that. And so coming off of a ride up to that, it kind of let me know I was doing the right thing. And I still go to that clinic for my healthcare. I still love the people there. I still trust them. They were an awesome team. And they still have good sentiment about me when I go there and they're like, ah, like you were good and we miss you. And that still feels good after being gone for 4 years. And so I think
Yeah,
that is key.
every single relationship is an assignment, and the assignment is always the same. It's to love.
Mhm.
So even when we're at work, and if we you can get super trippy about this. You're like, man, out of 7 billion people, this person is working with me right now.
Yo, this is Hunter from the Everything's Connected podcast. You clearly have great taste in podcasts because you're listening to this awesome show. Did you know I am also part of the Podcast Connection Network? That's right, there's a whole network of shows dedicated to mental health and holistic well being, just like this one. We've got something for every mood and every goal. So if you're looking to expand your horizons and explore some incredible content, check us out. The link to the Podcast Connection Network is waiting for you in the description below. Enjoy the rest of the show.
That's we could just say it's totally random and totally coincidence. Or if you view it the way I view it, that every single relationship is not coincidence, that it's actually an assignment, and that that person is assigned to you just like you're assigned to them, and that there's a reason for it. And the reason is to grow our capacity to love. So some assignments are really easy, right? Some
Yeah.
relationships, we see somebody that is really gracious in their compliments and
Hmm.
genuine and authentic and cares about us, and maybe has a lot of gratitude,
Respect.
a lot of respect. Yeah, great assignments. And then some assignments are even better because they're the ones that we actually get to grow with. And they're the ones that don't have the respect and don't have the gratitude and don't. And those assignments are good too, because again, like we said, I acted out of integrity. I acted with a tremendous high amount of anger. I used to blame it on my dad, like, oh, my dad has a quick trigger. I have a quick trigger.
Yeah.
Just like how I was raised, like it's genetic. I really believed it was genetic. And I'm like, now when I see somebody that is coming at me with the same type of ways that I used to come at people, I can have total compassion instead of taking it personally. And I'm like, oh, okay, now my assignment with this person is to not take it personally and still see the beautiful human being here that's just suffering. And that's my assignment right now. Easier said than done.
What
Totally
changed?
easier
What
said than
changed?
done.
Where, if you had those thoughts at one point, what what was the moment that changed it for you that you were like, you realized that was the assignment was to love and that it's not genetic and this is choice and that you decided I'm changing this.
It was the movie The Secret. So I saw the movie The Secret when I was 25.
Hmm.
And in that movie, Rhonda Byrne said, thoughts are things, and that your emotional frequency sends out like magnets to attract other things that resonate with your frequency. And that if you want beautiful things in your life, like a beautiful wife, wonderful children,
Hmm.
harmonious relationships at work, if you want wealth and success and health, if you want all the things that you want, those things vibrate up here
Yeah.
at frequencies that are at the highest of the frequencies. That's love and joy and peace and harmony, right? Well, you have to become that in order to have that, because you don't have what you do, you have who you are. And that was like the epiphany. It was, whoosh, wow, okay, so the people that spit on me, that hate me, that want to
Hmm.
fight me, that I want to fight back, all of that stuff is being attracted to me because of my emotional frequency, I was like, all right, let's go. All I got to do is figure this emotional frequency thing out. And then it only took 20 years.
Yeah. And what were the struggles? Because I kind of think the same thing. You know, it's funny you say this. I, somewhere in the past 2 years, when I really decided, like, you know, my wife and I were probably on the brink of divorce, and I could not stand the thought of not having my daughter. And yeah, oh man. And I don't know, somewhere in there, I don't know if it was the book on audio, the video, something, but I listen because I do Uber Eats. Um, I listen to The Secret over and over and over and over. And, but you know, it still within this 2 years, I kind of feel like an infant in this development journey. What were some of the stumbling blocks that you had, and how'd you get through it? Because, you know, in this kind of big, if you look at it largely, like you said, 20 years, like if I go, oh man, I've only been doing this for 2 years, it's a blip. And sometimes you're like, you really know it's working. And then sometimes you're like, man, you feel doubtful. You're like, man, is this even working? Is this true? This is bullshit. You're like, but not really, not really. Because, you know, the funny thing was that day, as soon as I decided and I changed that,
Yeah.
um, I went out into the world with my dad, and I remember, like, we grabbed some lunch. I went in and got a few pastries or something, and the person at the counter, like, he looked like a short, chubby 50 Cent. And he was just so kind, but we were vibing. And then when I was at the self-checkout, this lady was like talking to me, and I was like, oh, I have a podcast, because I was wearing my Waffle House shirt, and she's like,
Mm.
oh, we need one of those there. And I go, actually, my podcast is named after this. And we start talking about it. And and I sat there when I went out into the car, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that one shift I made this morning,
Right.
and telling my dad, like, I made the video, and then I told my dad, like, hey, I realize all this. And then we went out into the world. And then every interaction after that was just almost magical.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I mean, you're describing it. And so it's personal experience with it where all of a sudden it stops becoming magical and you just say the whole world is magic. And that is the way it works, is that everything is magic, nothing is logical, nothing was as the way that I used to see it and the way that the majority of the world sees it, that the world is linear and logical, is not the way at all. And you're like, wow, I can't believe everybody's so blind right now. How do they not see what I see? And the more and the more and the more you recognize this, the more and the more and the more obvious it all becomes. And then it's just like no longer really magical. It's just like, oh, that's just how it works. When I get into pretty frustrated moods, I attract to me pretty frustrated people. That it will continue to surprise you.
Mm,
And then you'll be like, oh, okay, I can't go out in this frustrated mood now
yeah.
because it's going to create some damage and I have to fix it. I have to figure it out. And you named some things that are my go-tos. So you said you went into nature and sat by the water. You started journaling. You went for a walk. You were in silence, right? These are the foundations of how to get back into good moods. And the journaling is, I think, the most important one because journaling is a conversation where we can pull the subconscious thought that's within us that is creating the discord. It's not the external event ever. We are never suffering because of the event. We are always suffering because our thoughts of the event. And we now need to go into our journal and say, I'm seeing this incorrectly. If I could see it correctly,
Hmm.
I wouldn't be suffering about it. So it takes a lot of humility, which is the first good mood I write about. Humility says, I no longer want to be right. I just want to be happy. So I don't need to be right.
Yeah.
That person who's been super mean to me, that's harmed me, that stole from me, that hurt me, all the different things. And I want to be right that they shouldn't have done that. I have to let it go. I have to let go of my desire to be right about them. And I have to be really humble and have a lot of humility and say, I would rather be happy. So what's happiness look like when somebody's being mean to us? It is to notice that every time I judge them, whatever thoughts I have about them are things I don't like about me.
Yep.
And to look and find that in me. So I spent a lot of time with Byron Katie's work. I don't, have you studied her at all?
I have not. Who is she? Tell me about
Dude,
it.
so
Oh, wait,
I've
one
I've
quick
read
little thought. Somebody had a post. They said, "What's the most valuable thing you can purchase for under $100?" And my answer on Threads was a journal.
Yeah, perfect. Totally agree. Totally agree. So Byron Katie has a 4-step process
Hmm.
called the work. And what it is anytime something triggers you, you write it down and she has you answer questions. It says, in this situation, I am blank emotion because, and we write it out. And so in this situation, I'm pissed off
Yeah.
because that guy's such an a-hole. Okay. Then, and you answer like 10 questions like this. And you just want to be so honest. You want to be like, what is the real, what's the
Yeah.
thing I'm actually feeling? And then you go back and you question it. And the question on that first statement I just said is, that person's an a-hole. Is it true? I'm like, yeah. The second question is, can I absolutely know with 100% certainty what they're thinking in their mind that they're an a-hole? I'm like, well, no, I can't get inside their head. I can't really know what they were thinking. So I
Right.
can't with 1,000% certainty know that they meant to do what they did, even though I think I know that they meant to do it, but I can't really know. So that starts to create a little bit of separation between the I want to be right and unhappy mind to the I'm okay not being right mind, that I can't really know what I think I know. Then the next question is, how do I feel? Who do I show up as? And what do I do when I'm believing this thought? They're an a-hole. I'm like, well, when I'm believing that thought, I don't even want to talk to my kids. I'm cold to my wife. I can't focus on work. I'm actually my worst self when I'm obsessed
Standoffish.
about this. Yeah, I'm standoffish to everybody. I'm not doing any good for me or people I love.
You're just waiting for somebody to test you.
Yeah, right. Come on.
That's how I feel.
Then the next question, the question number 3 is, if this thought could be erased from my mind, if I could never think this thought again that they're an a-hole, if it just could be it's just gone, who would I be tomorrow? Like, who would I be right now if I couldn't think that thought anymore? And I'm like, well, shoot, I'd be happy again.
Yeah, right?
I'd go hug my kids. I'd kiss my wife. I'd go crush it at work. I'd actually would be amazing today if that thought wasn't bothering. And then that's like the aha. Every time I get hung up on a thought, I do this process. And I'm like, it is not that a-hole that's
Hmm.
pissing me off. It's my thought that he's an a-hole that's pissing me off. And so the final step is to turn it around and to say the exact opposite of the thought and to figure out that it's just as valid. So the opposite is he's not an a-hole, he's actually a good guy. What are 3 reasons he's a good guy? Oh man, this could be hard at first, but you start to come up with them. You're like, well,
He
I'm
helps
sure
people.
his mom likes him.
Yeah. Or maybe their intentions are right because I think
Yeah.
a lot of times, like I say about kind of big corporate America, is, you know, everything I think starts with a good intention.
Yes.
And at some point, the capitalism and greed and all kinds of things come in, and it gets furthest away from whatever it was intended to be, whatever
Mhm.
that, that pure intention started as.
Yeah, so we can recognize that he's actually a good guy because he had pure intentions. Another turnaround is I'm an a-hole. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, with the way I've been treating my wife, with the way I haven't been hanging out with my kids, I'm the a-hole in my life right now. That guy's not here in my house creating the tension that I'm creating. I'm the one who's being a jerk.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, how am I actually an a-hole to that person? And this can be tough because they've been so mean to us and we haven't retaliated. But in my mind, if he could hear the way I'm talking about him in my mind, he'd be like, oh man, you think all those awful things about me? And so that process totally dismantles all judgment. And judgment Judgment says, I'm resisting what is, I don't like what is, and while I resist, I suffer. So when we dismantle the judgment, we dismantle the resistance. We move into acceptance, which then allows us to get into good moods again.
Mm. Oh, man. I have to open up my body here. Like all today's Wednesday. All the days have run together so much with all this. Because you lose sleep over it. This stuff builds up in your body, this
Mm-hmm.
tension,
It does, yeah.
and it is stressful, 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 stressful. Um, so let's go through the 8 bad moods so people can kind of understand them like in sequence.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first we talked about is this shame, is
Mm-hmm.
I'm not right as I am. Total lie. All the 8 bad moods are actually lies, which is great. Which
Yes.
is great because the truth is always love. This is what's so cool, man. And this is why anytime we're suffering, we are not seeing the truth. Is the
Mm.
ultimate truth is that we're being loved and guided at all times, even when it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
I still get hung up though. Like I'm just like, if I got a cancer
Mhm.
diagnosis tomorrow, I'd be like, dude, this
Man.
shouldn't be happening. Like I've got so much to do. I've got kids that need me, my wife. Like I would be totally stressed about that. And then I'd work on it and get myself out of it eventually. So the second lie is the lie of guilt. I deserve to be punished because I've done bad things.
Oh man, that's followed me for 30 years. I'm just now starting to understand that I'm a human. I made some poor choices and mistakes, but I'm not a bad person.
No, you're not. And nobody is. And this is so the other side of guilt is judgment. If I think other people are bad people, then I also think that they deserve to be punished for their mistakes. But we need to eliminate all that thinking, right?
But
So,
I'm more apt to forgive other people than I am forgive myself.
and we want to do both. And it's really important that, and this is, I kind of was touching on this with you when I was saying, hey, all the ways that you were angry were perfect. That
Right.
was actually your curriculum. It was your curriculum to act that way. And there's no mistake. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just learning what not to do. And once you learn what not to do, you then get to heal other people. And now it's like, oh, okay, I couldn't actually heal other angry people if I didn't experience what it's like to be angry. How could we? We wouldn't be able to relate.
Yeah.
So now we have a mission. And it's like, oh, okay, actually my mission is because of the pain that I had and that I inflicted. Great. Okay, that was supposed to happen. So there's nothing wrong with that. But that guilt will say, no, no, Matt, man, you were mean. You were awful. You said terrible things. You hurt people. You cheated on your girlfriends. You did some pretty terrible things out there, man. And you can never be forgiven, right? That's guilt. Well, guilt, just all that does is create darkness in our psyche. And then when we feel bad, we do bad. So guilt doesn't help us. What is real is consequence. So every single action has a consequence. If I'm angry to somebody, they get pissed back at me, that's a consequence. All of everything you've ever done has already had consequences. You've already learned the lessons you need to learn. We just don't need to punish ourselves now. The next emotion after guilt is overwhelm or hopelessness. This one is tough. This is where depression lives.
I had that when I was sitting by the water.
That overwhelm and that hopelessness is so heavy. And it's like, what's the use?
Yeah.
What's even the use? Well, it's a lie. It's another lie. The lie is it's no good. I can't do anything about it. There's just no use. It's no good, right? We have to get out of that.
Hard.
Sometimes if the depression is too big,
Mhm.
we need help from somebody else. And so we can pray and we can say, God, help me see the light
Guilty of
here.
that.
I love to
Plenty. A
pray.
lot of it.
God's line is always open. A lot of times we pray, and then what happens is somebody comes to us in the form of a friend. And they're like, in my chapter on hopelessness, I was praying. I'm like, God, man, help me out of this. Like I feel like life has no point right now. And that's a tough place to be. When we think life doesn't have any meaning,
It's
nothing has meaning. And so everything doesn't have meaning. So it's like, why do anything positive? But I prayed. I'm like, help me get out of this. And what happens? I get on a phone call with my buddy Matt. He's like, dude, you need to hang around some positive people. And I'm like, F you, Matt. I am a positive person. Can't you tell? But then I'm like, wait a minute. That was the answer to my prayer. He told me what I needed to hear was that I needed to go hang around positive people, right?
Yeah.
The law of attraction, the secret. My vibration was so low, I needed to hang around people with high vibrations. He was right. So I went to a meetup with some really high-minded people. And at the meetup, just being in their energy field, I left pulled up and I was out of the depression. So, but hopelessness, sometimes we need help from other people. The next bad mood is grief. Now, all of these moods though have positive sides. So grief has a positive side. Hopelessness, all of them actually can help us in some way. We just don't want to be stuck there. So we can be really sad. Somebody dies, we're supposed to be sad. There's nothing wrong with that. What would be wrong is living our life always sad, always saying that, man, it's not as good now as it used to be. That life was good back then before this thing happened, and now it just can't be again. That's living in perpetual grief, and we don't want to live there. So those are the first four. Those are the lowest ones. I'll let you like kind of just give your take on what you think of the lowest four.
Experienced all of them on Sunday.
All in 15 hours.
Oh man, it was yeah. I mean, I quit drinking over a year ago, and I've had other periods where I didn't drink at all for a long time. And I it it's just like you're only as sick as your secrets. And so admitting that Sunday, like I experienced all of that, like, man, I was crushed that I felt that my daughter reacted that way because of my past behavior. And you start asking, would my wife and daughter be better off without me?
Yeah,
You
that's that
know?
hope. That's a hopelessness emotion.
Yeah. And then you're in that depression.
Yep.
And
And
grief,
the answer is not right. Of course, they
of
need you,
course it's
man.
not.
But
No,
in that moment, we can get so lost in the emotion,
overwhelm.
we can wonder if we even are worthwhile, right? So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's a very
Everything.
tricky emotion. That's the emotion where we would commit suicide, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the most it's the most self-damaging emotion. But it's just an emotion. It's not who we are, and it's never true. And what I really want to get through to the person listening is that when you feel that, it feels real, but
Yes.
it's just an emotion, and that emotion can pass. And once the emotion passes, the sun comes out again.
Yeah. Because you're like, yeah, after the 5 miles, I was like, look, like, don't be making any permanent decisions to temporary problems.
Yeah.
Um, it feels so real because the guilt, unfortunately, if our bank accounts compounded like guilt, if the interest compounded like guilt, we'd all be rich and wealthy. But man, that guilt can compound. And, it's taken me a long, long time at 48 just to now start to understand some of these concepts. But you know, with what I feel my mission is to help people, a servant. Everything I've always done has been a servant. Healthcare, anything, adding value, letting other people understand that they're not alone. And yeah, it was deep for a while, but I remember hearing a podcast one time or a statistic of saying that, if you were to commit suicide, there's a 1 in 3 chance that your child will do the same.
That's a good statistic to know.
And I
That
said,
is a good statistic to know
if you
because
love
a
your
lot of
kid, do
times
not do that.
A lot of times we care a lot more about someone else than we do ourselves, especially our own child. So that's a really, yeah. And I've talked to other people who've said, "Hey, I just couldn't do this to my children," and
Yeah.
that's what's kept them in that. And it's just in the emotion, though. The emotion's temporary, man. It is just temporary. So one of the ways we counteract guilt, what I teach in my book, is we write down 3 things we did well yesterday. And this is a practice I do to this day. It's the very first thing I do when I get my cup of coffee. I sit down with my journal and I write down 3 things I did well yesterday. Our brains naturally show us what's not going right. Always is showing us what we did wrong, what we said wrong, how we messed up. That's the brain's job. The brain's job is just to show us how we're not good enough. What the brain doesn't do is tell us what we did well. It's like if I did that well, I don't even have to think about it. It's going well.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm doing to counteract my guilt is every day I write down 3 things that I did well yesterday. It's very simple. In the beginning, though, it's kind of hard to come up with 3. Sometimes you can only come up with 1. You're like, man, I don't even think I did anything well yesterday. Right? Because we're so hyper focused. We're in the beginning of this process. We're so hyper focused on what we didn't do right and how we messed up. But stick with it.
But
After,
the world doesn't help us because the world from such a young age teaches you like nobody likes a braggart, you
Mhm.
know? And so, and especially myself, having excelled at different things throughout my life and career, because of something like that, I call it like programming, that you suppress those things and you become more like a perfectionist and you look at everything you do wrong versus what
Perfectionist,
you do
yeah,
right.
perfectionist is a symptom of guilt. And I was definitely that way and had a tremendous amount of guilt. And this writing down 3 things I did well every day completely reversed it. And what's going to happen in time is and you're right. Like people would compliment me. They'd be like, "Oh man, you did that so great," or like, "Oh, you were so kind," or
Yeah.
whatever. And I would just dismiss it. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's no big deal, but you're super cool." Right. And I
Yeah.
would deflect. I
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
accept
Like,
my
or that's
own.
the job, Oh, that's what I
Yeah.
thought I was supposed to do. I'm
Yeah.
just
Right.
doing what I thought
Yeah.
was required.
And I wouldn't accept the compliment and I wouldn't because I didn't ever think I was doing anything well enough. I was a perfectionist, right? This is a guilt riddled mind. By writing down 3 things you did well yesterday and knowing I have to do it tomorrow and then the next day and then the next day. And this is a lifelong practice for me. I'm always going to write down 3 things I did well.
And
My
you start
brain
looking for
starts
them.
to notice when I do something well in the moment. It's like, oh, dude, you just did that well. Oh
Hmm.
man, you were super cool there. Hey, you were really kind right there. Hey, that was really like great job, Matt. And in the moment, I'm like, oh, I guess I am kind of good at about a bunch of things. And then I start to notice other people. I'm like, oh, you did that well. You did that
Hmm.
well. You did that well. You're awesome. You're awesome. You're awesome. And all of a sudden, the guilt, which is still there, like, oh, but you kind of suck about that. And that still kind of sucked. It's so quiet because I'm just seeing how cool everyone is. I'm no longer judging what they're doing wrong because I'm not judging what I'm doing wrong. I'm just
So
affirming all that's right.
I'm in a group, a private group, and they asked for a win, and I put a win out there. And it sounds like, to me, man, I didn't even want to mention it because I'm like, they asked for the win. I'm giving you the win. What was the most fulfilling thing, the most fulfilling part of my yesterday? And I even put in parentheses, I'm like, I don't even want to, I feel terrible even mentioning this because I feel like it's egocentric and I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but this was the most fulfilling part of my day. And I'm trying to own and step into
Look at the way,
that,
dude,
that
Richard,
thing.
just look at the way that we can't even say one win out loud without saying, don't think I'm an egocentric maniac right now for
Right.
saying that I did something well, right? That's how guilt gets a hold of us. Yeah. So I love that practice that they did to say, what's the win? So what was your win?
Well, so my wife and I, we are kind of like caretakers through home health, where we take people, like elderly people, to whether it's shopping, the bank, help them cook, clean. Um, and we have a gentleman who's 97, just celebrated his 97th birthday, and he's been in a rehab for 2 months because he fell, and we take the laptop up there, we take him food, we get him his protein shakes, we get clothes, we help him check his email, his Facebook, his bank accounts, because he's 97 and still, but he doesn't have his desktop, because he's in a rehab hospital, and he still uses a computer. And, the thing is for he's been there for 2 months, and we've been visiting for 2 months. We don't get paid for it, but that's not why we do it. Like, it doesn't matter to us. His family's further away. There's a different dynamic there as to why maybe they don't visit as much. I don't know. Doesn't matter. That's not where we come from, and that's not our intentions or why we do it. But, he's 97. He was in the Navy like I was. He, like, just the conversations we have. And, my wife had to go get my daughter from school, and I stayed with him till 7 p.m. and we just have these conversations. And it's just such a being present in the moment. You're not thinking about anything else, and you're just spending time with this person who's lived so much life and so much history. And, because I'm always interested, always like wanting to know that, like, when people, like, I had a nurse on hospice, and I was tripping on mushrooms when I was texting with her on hospice because we hadn't talked in years. But it's like, what's important in this life? Just be a good person, which I know you are, is what she told me.
Hmm.
And the same with him at 97. You're like, where do you place the value? And he starts telling me like these stories of, like, I've always had a problem speaking the truth with my mouth. If I don't agree with something, if I think something's stupid, I'm not going to do it just because you told me to do it, just because that's the way it's always been done, just because you think I shouldn't question it, because you're my boss, whatever you are, whatever. And I realized, like, man, all the things, like the same thing I was telling my daughter, almost he was reaffirming to me, is that, hey, I was kind of the same way. Like, I spoke up. I went against the grain. I told him, like, this is a dumb idea. Like, why would you even think that way? You're wasting resources. Why would you have me? He was a ship builder. He built the ship, and they wanted to put him on a different aircraft carrier because he'd been on two other ones, and let somebody else take the ship that he was responsible for building from the ground up because he was a naval architect and an engineer. It's like, I built this. Why would you think somebody else is more qualified to run this ship and send me to a totally, like, it's so dumb. It's like you building a real estate company and going, no, now we want you to go, just show houses over here at some other company,
Mhm.
even though you built something from the ground up. And he's like, well, I went to my boss, and then he went to DC, and this and that, the other, and all this stuff. And, finally how it ended, like, with a recommendation of a Bronze Star from him, because, it was like also during the Vietnam War, and there was a shortage of parts, and he worked with a company and had them manufactured, and he had them manufacture extra. And so when all these other ships started having these problems during the Vietnam War, his forethinking, he was the person, because you couldn't get them from anywhere else, that he had extra and was able to keep everything going. And it was just amazing to like, to see that and see, like, wow, maybe, like, what I have is for a purpose, just like him, just like I'm telling my daughter. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't get paid for any of it, but that's not why we do it. And it's just a magical moment. And, uh, you know, at 97, and I've spent a lot of time with him, help him with his computer every time it goes out. And he doesn't have a cell phone, so anytime his computer messes up, it's hard to get a recovery code because they want to text it, and he has only a landline. And so, but it's all these different things. But, understanding that it's not about the money that we could have made over 2 months. That's not why we visit him. It's because we have a relationship with him and we care about him and the time we spend together. And his family doesn't do that for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. That's their business. But, you know, but yeah, I was like, I don't want to feel like I'm not some martyr. I'm not whatever. But that was the most fulfilling part of my day. That was my biggest win yesterday. And they asked the question, I answered, but it's like I I have that where I want to mute myself and go like in quotations, like, please don't think I'm bragging or being egocentric because I'm doing this good deed. That's
Well,
kind of not the point.
Richard, once you start this process of writing down 3 wins every day, that will stop. Because what you'll do is you'll start to celebrate how amazing you are and how amazing your uniqueness is every single day. And that you'll start to see that you do so much good every single day that you won't even feel like you're bragging because you will be such an affirmer of everyone. You're going to start to see that everyone's doing so much good every single day that all you'll see is people doing good things. And then when they're like, well, what are you doing well? And you're like, man, I'm helping this guy that doesn't have anyone else to talk with. And he's like teaching me at the same time. And by the way, I see that you're doing this amazing thing. And like, wow, like we're all just so freaking awesome. In this, now the world just becomes a super happy place. And everywhere you go, people just want to be near you because you're such an affirmer of what's going right. And that is weird. And that is unique because the majority of the world, 80%, are focused on what's not good enough yet. And that's the difference. And so, yeah, I actually agree with everything you're saying and you're teaching your daughter. We need to be weird. We have to be unique. We have to go against the grain, against the norm. The norm is people that are suffering. I want to go upstream. I want to go upstream away from the people that are suffering and to people that are authentically happy. And it's very few. It's actually very few. But once we live that way, we just want to help everyone else like wake up and like, hey, wake up. You don't have to be one of the 80% that's suffering. You can actually be one of the 20% that's enjoying everything.
Well, because the biggest thing is, the way we make the world a better place is we increase that 20%. And I feel like through podcasting, I say that all the time. It's like this has way more of a reach than I ever could have had in the clinics I ran. Even if I had made it to CEO of a $7 billion organization, this is still way more impact potential.
The world's waking up because of people like you. And it's just true. But you woke up because of The Secret, and I woke up because of The Secret. And so Rhonda in 2005 put out her message. Podcast wasn't a thing then, but videos and DVDs and books were. And then she woke up a bunch of people. And then now that we're awake, we're like tapping other people and saying, hey, you wake up too. And eventually it's going to flip and it's going to go from 80-20 to 80-20 the other way. And when that happens, wars, not enough food to eat, greed in business, all the things that were like, oh, Republicans suck or Democrats suck and their policy's awful and their policy and the world is dying. All of that stuff stops.
Yeah.
All of that is not a Democrat or Republican problem. It's not a China versus US problem. It is a 80% of consciousness right now is stuck in egocentric suffering. And once it's the other way, and only 20% of people are egocentric suffering, and 80% are all about, hey, the world is love. And man, the Beatles were saying this in the 70s. They're like, all you need is love, right? Jesus was saying it 2,000 years ago. Before him, we had other spiritual leaders that were always saying, just love. Like that's the answer. It's always been right in front of all of us, but we've been so asleep.
We're so much the same. And kind of like, my podcast started as that is I'm sitting next to a stranger at the Waffle House on one side, and one side is like, hey, what's his story? We're all like, we're already at the same place, so we already have good taste. So we're already more alike
Yeah.
than we think. So what the heck are we always fighting over? We're more
Yep.
alike. And so, like when you say love is the answer, it's true because I remember working in like level one trauma, and you get a lot of homeless people that come in because sometimes it's brack or jail, and or they come in to get off the street when it's cold, get a box lunch, and if we have the room, and it's not traumatic, oftentimes we're doing that and allowing that. But I said, I don't care if it's Tony Robbins or the bum on the street. We all want to love and be loved.
Hmm. That's
And
it.
that's it.
That's it, man. Man, what a perfect way to end the show.
Yeah,
That,
that
that
is
is
wild.
that's so cool. I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud of your journey. And I'm really proud of your show. You're out there doing the work of the light.
Oh, I'm
And we need it,
trying.
man. There's a lot of darkness still.
There is.
If you think about Star Wars, think about like Frodo Baggins, Bilbo Baggins,
Hmm.
light eventually wins.
Well, plug anything you want to plug before we hop off, and I'll make sure to include it all in the show notes. And this has been a enlightening kind of magical conversation. I have all kinds of good feelings about it and a lot to ruminate on.
Same, man. No, I really like you a lot, dude. It's so fun to meet somebody that is just like on purpose about being the best human they can be. It's rare. It's rare and it's fun. It's fun to run into you and
Yeah.
find someone that's on that path to just becoming the best they can be. Yeah, and the best place to plug in with me is by plugging into the Good Mood Revolution podcast. And
Okay.
it's like a lot of times people listen to one great podcast like the Men of the House,
Hmm.
and they're like, okay, well, maybe I can have another one that's going on because we like to listen to podcasts every day. So that's a good
Yeah.
place to plug in.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you spending your time with me, and yeah, I'm just so excited. I'm ready to tackle the rest of the day, and I appreciate your kind words and your compliments, and nothing happens by accident, and I'm thankful that we had this interview. I got the goosebumps again. This is third time, so
That's awesome. Thank you,
I can't
brother. I
contain my
appreciate you.
smile. All right. Peace out.
See you, man.
Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Let's go.
Asteroid of fear.